strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
And welcome back to another Warrior Creed live stream with me, the radical Majid Nawaz. And today the topic is about the new mayor or mayor-elect of New York City, Zohran Mamdani. And the stream entitled Zohran Mamdani is an Obama, Clinton, Soros CIA asset, is obviously self-explanatory. We are going to set out for everybody why the new mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, that many are excited about and many are as well quite terrified by, he has divided opinion. Now, regardless of how he goes on to perform, regardless of whether or not he becomes a good mayor for New York City or a bad mayor from the perspective of governing New York and New York citizens and how they view him, that, of course, will be a retrospective, a topic for another day. We felt it's important for everybody to understand whether you're pro or against Zohran Mamdani, simply to know who he is and where he's coming from, how his campaign was astroturfed by the Obama Clinton CIA network, and how it was funded by the George Soros and his son, Alexander Soros network. And once you know that information, you can then, of course, make up your own minds as to whether or not you support him. But it is important to understand exactly who the man is and where he comes from, even if you're pro Zohran Mamdani, because many of the people online who are pro this new mayor would, I imagine, be quite interested to know or understand the Soros connections and the historical Obama Clinton CIA connections as well, and how this campaign was astroturfed to take a relatively unknown, obscure local community organizer and catapult them into a premium political position. Does that ring a bell? Precisely the same thing was done with Obama, beginning with the community organizing connection, all the way up to the sudden emergence and catapulting to a top political position. We've seen this movie before. Whether or not you support Obama, now a overwhelming majority of those who vote for the Democratic Party still see or view the former President Obama favorably. Whether or not you're in that camp or not, it matters. It's relevant to know the political pedigree of Zohran Mamdani, who his political backers and godfathers and promoters and financiers have been, so that you can then make up your own judgment as to what you think of him and how you assess his mayoralty once the time for that is right as well. And the image that we've used for today's stream, we'll share on your screens with you right about now. And that is the image of Alex Soros, that's George Soros' son and heir, who has succeeded his empire, and Mamdani arm in arm. Now, this photograph is relevant because of the nature of Mamdani's campaign. Campaigning as he did against billionaires, it is important to know, as Curtis Silva, the founder of the Guardian Angels and Mamdani's Republican candidate rival in New York City, has mentioned, and we'll get to as well in the press, that it appears that Mamdani isn't against billionaires. He's only against those billionaires that disagree with him. Because here on your screens is an image of a billionaire dynasty. This is the heir to George Soros, his son. And he's arm in arms with Mamdani and congratulating him on his victory. So clearly a certain type of billionaire, the type that's on your screen right now, isn't particularly offended by Mamdani's campaign against billionaires. But let's begin with this. Let's begin at the beginning. And that is, as you see there on your screens, we're going to show you a video of a relatively unknown Mamdani and what things used to be like for him. Because the first point that we'd like to build on is that this campaign was an astroturfed campaign. What does astroturf mean for those of you that aren't familiar with internet slang? An astroturfed campaign is a campaign that has been given the impression that it is incredibly popular online by paying for many smaller accounts to promote a particular issue or candidate or person or cause. Once the impression is given online that this is a very popular campaign or cause, then in the real world, people start adopting it as if it is a popular cause, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's astroturfing. And clearly, Mamdani's campaign, having emerged from relative obscurity a year ago, was astroturf. Take a look at how Mamdani used to be received on the streets of New York just a year ago.
How's it going, guys? Do you have 60 seconds to talk just about the election? How you guys doing? Do you guys want to talk about the election for a minute? How you doing, boss? How's it going, sir? You have a minute? Excuse me, ma'am. How you doing, boss? Why is it that you don't feel as confident? How's it going, guys? Do you have 60 seconds to talk just about the election?
Now, what you saw there on the date of that video footage was from November 2024. That's a still obscure Mamdani on the streets of New York seeking public response to his political campaign, and nobody really knew who he was. And yet, fast forward to today, and the difference is stark. This is Mamdani's first speech after winning the New York mayoralty, and he is giving the speech in a mosque, and you can see clearly people have not only heard of him, but are loudly cheering him on.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is such a pleasure to be here alongside so many friends and so many for whom today is the first time I'm having the opportunity to meet you. And this is the first Jama'ah that I have been to since we won our election on Tuesday. And it was an election where we made history. An election where we showed that what New Yorkers and New York City is craving is a city that all of us belong to. A city that serves everyone who calls it home. And a city where no longer will we have to debate who gets to call themselves a New Yorker, but one where we can in fact work to the benefit of all New Yorkers. And I've been asked many a time, what does it mean to be the first Muslim mayor of New York City? And I have shared this with many who have prayed alongside us today, but I have never said this as the mayor-elect. So if you will humor me to say it once more. As a young child learning about Islam, my dada, my grandfather Yusuf, my dadi, my grandmother Kulsum would teach me of what it meant to be a good Muslim. And they would tell me it meant to be a good person, to help those in need and to harm no one. And my dadi would teach me the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I think of those words especially today, because today at Soros is a day of service, a day where we give back. And the words of, if there is food for one, then there is food for two. And if there is food for two, then there is food for four. It reminds us that it is a choice to deprive some of food. It is a choice that we can change to ensure that all are fed. Because we remember that which has been shared with us as we have grown up, many of us in New York City. If you are not at the table, you may find yourself on the menu. And it was a Muslim brother in Malcolm X who reminded us that sitting at the table does not make you a diner. You have to be eating some of what's on that plate. And the time is now for every New Yorker in the wealthiest city, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, to be able to eat, to be able to feed their families, to be able to both be free and...
Now, whether or not you see what Mamdani spoke about there, whether or not he achieves that, whether or not you agree with that, isn't the point of today's stream. I want to make this absolutely clear. This is not a left-wing, right-wing commentary on the election of Zohran Mamdani in New York, and it's not a predetermined judgment of how he will perform. That would be unjust of us because we don't know how he would perform, and our concerns that he is an Obama, Clinton, Soros, CIA asset do not preclude from the fact that he still may do well as a mayor. We don't know that. This stream's purpose is simply to point out the fact that he is an Obama, Clinton, Soros, CIA asset. Make of that information what you will. If you support him, reconcile that with your own worldviews about billionaires, the CIA, and Clinton, Hillary, especially. If you don't support him, then of course this information may be welcomed by you. However, again, that doesn't necessarily imply he'll be a bad mayor, because at this point, it's important for us to also recognize that the alternatives, such as Cuomo, would perhaps have been even worse. So we recognize New Yorkers were stuck between a rock and a hard place. Personally, Curtis Silver looks quite pleasant from where we're sitting, but nevertheless, a Republican is hardly likely at this given moment to have won the New York mayoralty. So between the Democratic candidates, of course, the alternative was Cuomo, and he was disgraced during COVID and wasn't necessarily a better alternative. So with that said, let's get into some of the weeds here. How is Zohran Mamdani an Obama, Clinton, Soros, CIA asset? Well, as we said, we're beginning with the point about his campaign being astroturfed, having come from nowhere, a relatively obscure person having been catapulted from the position of community organizer to a premium political position. And so let's begin with this piece of invasion. Of course, we mentioned this as an analysis. Please do verify some of these yourselves, though the information appear to be valid. And that is as is on this poster's account, Union Busting Bot, on Twitter. And he states, Mamdani's father, Mahmoud Mamdani, was brought over to the US on the same CIA-linked Airlift Africa, also known as the Kennedy Airlift Project, the same CIA asset father, Barack Obama, seen brought to America. Now, the Airlift Africa Project, reading from the text accompanying that post, the image here, it indicates was brought to the United States, the Airlift Africa Project. We'll just read it for you. The Airlift Africa Project, as it was called, had already brought a number of African students to study in the US, including Washington Akumu from Kenya. In 1962, it would bring Barack Obama Sr., the father of former President Barack Obama. The project was underwritten by the Kennedy Foundation and the African American Student Foundation, and it goes on. Now, if that holds, that Obama's father was brought in on this project, here is another text from a book that has been posted by that original poster on Twitter, making the point that Mamdani's father was also brought in through the same route, Airlift Africa, a CIA project to groom future leaders of Africa. And again, we're going to read from the text that's on your screens now. The 1962 airlift was broader than the one in 1961, and by 1963, the last of the series in which the AASF played a role. The program was broader still and filled with a new generation of East Africans, most of them born after World War II, rather than before it, as most of the earlier airlift students had been. The 1963 airliftees were also younger than those in previous groups because they were able to go to the United States closer to the time of their graduation from secondary school. Previous airlifters had waited for years before having a chance to travel abroad for a college-level education. Among the 1963 group were George Saitoti and Mahmoud Mamdani. Class of 1963, Airlift Africa. Zohran Mamdani's father was brought in on the same, according to this text and this book that's been published, was brought in on the same CIA plan, which is a project known as Airlift Africa. Obama's father was brought in on that plan, as was Zohran Mamdani's father. Now, the connection to Obama is why we raise this. not to say that like father and therefore like son, and because his father was brought in on the same project Obama's father was brought in on, it means necessarily that he himself is a CIA, Obama, Clinton, Soros asset. We're not making that logical leap. We're simply stating for the moment that there's a connection that you should pay attention to as we proceed through all the receipts. Now we've established that his father was brought in on the same Airlift Africa plan that Obama's father was brought in. Is it any surprise then that Obama, President Obama, his speechwriter, has fully backed Zohran Mamdani? On your screens now is John Favreau's post. Put whatever views you may have about Mamdani's politics aside for a moment. When was the last time you saw a candidate campaign like this? Now, of course, that's a bit full on. It's a bit on the nose, because as Favreau knows, the last time you saw a candidate campaign like Mamdani was actually Obama. And the similarities don't end there. If we continue, we'll see here, again on your screens, from that same poster on Twitter, who's done some deep dive into Mamdani's background. And he states there, Union Busting Bot, he states there on the 7th of July, the same year Zohran graduated from university, 2014, he took a job as a community organizer at the Democratic Party adjacent activist training school, Change Corps, which is part of the Public Interest Network, or PIN. FEC records showed that he worked there for at least 2 years. And here is the entry of Zohran Mamdani working as a community organizer for Change Corps. And of course, as we all know or should know, President Obama also started his political career working as a community organizer. So again, the similarities and the parallels continue to grow, but they will continue to grow for you to a point by the end of this stream. We are left with little doubt that Zohran Mamdani is a manufactured product of the Obama, Clinton, Soros network. So to continue reading, we've just established Mamdani started off as a community organizer, exactly like Obama. And then look at the next point here, made by the same poster at Union Busting Bot. Zohran Mamdani is being advised, we'll blow this up for you so you can read it too. Zohran Mamdani is being advised by Patrick Gaspard. Now, who, you may ask, is Patrick Gaspard? Well, Gaspard is a former White House advisor to none other than Obama, an ambassador to South Africa. He's also an SEIU Labour bureaucrat, a DNC Democratic National Committee executive director, and president of the anti-communist and likely CIA Front Open Society Foundations. And so the connection with Gaspard, having been a former Obama advisor, now also working on the Zohran Mamdani campaign, continues to build the parallels between Obama's rise and Zohran Mamdani's rise. And again, we will move to the next one to carry on from the same poster at Union Busting Bot. Zohran's mother, and we'll bring this up. She was a movie director. It states here, Zohran's mother, film director Mira Nair, directed Cal Penn in the 2006 film The Namesake. Now, you may be wondering, okay, so what's that got to do with anything? Why is it relevant that Zohran's mother directed an actor named Cal Penn in the 2006 film The Namesake? Well, that's because Penn campaigned for Obama's 2008 run and will go on to become associate director in the Office of Public Liaison for Obama between 2009 and 2011. And that same Penn who worked for Obama as associate director in the Office of Public Liaison campaigned for Zohran. And there he is. So again, building the connection, that's Zohran Mamdani standing next to the actor Cal Penn, who was a former Obama staffer who was on Zohran's campaign as well. Building the connection, continuing to build the connection that Zohran Mamdani is a product of the Obama, Clinton, Soros, CIA network. Take that how you will. It doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad man, but it tells you exactly where he's coming from. And that's all you need to know, really, for you to decide how you feel about that. Now, there is, of course, a history of Zohran Mamdani's old tweets criticizing Obama. Now, this is interesting because of how it was then turned around. The New York Post reports on the 21st of May, 2025, Zohran Mamdani trashed Barack Obama as pretty damn evil in resurfaced pro-Edward Snowden tweets. And we'll read from that text there. That's on your screens now. socialist mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani trashed Barack Obama as pretty damn evil in a series of resurfaced tweets where he questioned the former president's liberal cred and accused him of lying. Now, when Mamdani was challenged about this, though, you can see on the bold in the bottom of that text, the Zohran Mamdani campaign's response when they were challenged about his old tweets were as follows. This campaign's grassroots momentum has our opponents so desperate that they're looking through the tweets of a 21-year-old, said Mamdani campaign spokesman Andrew Epstein. Zohran was proud to volunteer on Barack Obama's campaign for president. So we've now established, in an attempt to rebut some of his old criticism of Obama, which appears to have been politically expedient, that in fact Zohran volunteered on Obama's campaign. And again, you're beginning to build the picture. And then what happens, as Aaron Rupa posts with this video, Mamdani says he was honored to have a conversation with Obama to contain the situation of his old tweets from when he was 21, criticizing Obama. Obama and Mamdani became friends, as you do with the president of the United States of America. He just calls you and happens to be friends with you and forgives you for criticizing him when you were 21 years old. And of course, this campaign was entirely organic and not astroturfed in the least. Obviously, forgive the sarcasm. Here is Zohran Mamdani making it clear that he's honored to have had a conversation with Obama.
The ways in which we govern to deliver on that. And the lessons of that conversations are ones that I hold close to me as we continue to build this campaign to win the general election. And it was an honor to receive that time and those reflections from the former president.
Did he signal that he could be endorsing you? And separately, have you also met with Senator Chuck Schumer at all? I know he said that he wanted to something to happen.
I leave the decision of endorsements to the president. I can tell you that my focus continues to be on the 8.5 million New Yorkers who call the city their home, and it continues to animate our campaign on how we deliver this campaign to make it a city that they can afford.
Now, some of you may have noticed that the permanent smile on his face and the smarm with which he speaks is clearly straight from the Obama School of Smarm. But again, we're going to build this evidence for you all. So by the end of it, you'll be left in no doubt as to the title of this stream, that Zohran Mamdani is an Obama, Clinton, Soros, CIA asset, now mayor of New York. So there he was saying that he's had a chat with Obama. And that now, clearly there's a relationship. Clearly there's a connection. And clearly there are parallels to his rise in the way that Obama rose as well. And all of this, we want to emphasize again, before we get to the next part, which is the Soros funding, and we'll establish that. All of this, for the meanwhile, again, to emphasize, only so far establishes that there are very clear parallels between the Zohran Mamdani campaign and the Obama campaign, and there are connections that go to Obama and Clinton and finance connections that go to Soros that are undeniable and impossible to ignore. But the parallels themselves should speak to you. Zohran Mamdani, like Obama, started off, we've established that in this stream, started off as a relative unknown, obscure local candidate. Like Obama, Zohran Mamdani was a community organizer. Like Obama, Zohran Mamdani then benefited from an AstroTurf campaign that catapulted him from being a relative unknown to becoming a primetime politician within the short space of a year, largely because the DNC machine, the Obama-Clinton DNC machine, Obama's spokesperson, John Favreau, as we've just demonstrated, Obama himself, all came on board and backed Zohran Mamdani. And Zohran Mamdani is therefore very clearly a product of the Obama-Clinton Soros network. It is also important to remember at this stage that the Soros backing for Zohran Mamdani and the photograph we showed you of Mamdani with Alex Soros, that also links him back to Clinton, because of course, who is Soros the son now married to? None other than Huma Abedin, Hillary Clinton's former staffer, who of course was infamously married to the congressman who unfortunately went to jail for repeatedly exposing himself to underage women, and ended up doing it again and again and again, and then made a documentary about his past doing it and did it again while making the documentary. He went to jail. Huma Abedin divorced him. She's now married to Alex Soros. Of course, that's the Clinton connection. The Obama connection we've made clear already. So let there be absolutely no doubt here that the campaign of Zohran Mamdani, astroturfed as it was, bringing him from relative obscurity to primetime position as it did, mirrors the Obama campaign and has all the same players involved as the Obama campaign had, and includes Mamdani beginning as a community organizer and ending up being an elected politician into a premium political position. This is an Obama campaign. The writing is all over it. The tone is all over it. And the smarm is all over it as well. We're going to now bring you to the next part, and that is establishing the Soros connections on the funding side, because they, of course, are also important. Campaigning as he did against billionaires as he did. Clearly, there is one billionaire that Mamdani wasn't necessarily unhappy about. And as is on your screens now, that billionaire was George Soros. The New York Post reports in the headline, George Soros funneled $37 million to Working Families Party and other lefty groups who backed Zohran Mamdani. That's the New York Post headline. There have been extensive investigations done into this. The question of Soros funding the campaign is not really much in doubt anymore. And we're going to read a key section of that New York Post article for you all. But in less than a decade, Soros ultra-woke grant-making network, Open Society Foundation, has indirectly funneled a combined $37 million to the Working Family Party and at least 9 other left-wing groups whose endorsements and get-out-the-vote groundwork played a pivotal role in helping Mamdani upset ex-governor Andrew Cuomo in the Democratic mayoral primary, the foundation's records show. So we won't read the rest of that text, but it's very clear that the Open Society Foundation, the George Soros Network, funded all the grassroots community groups that boosted Mamdani into position and helped him secure that nomination over Andrew Cuomo. Do keep in mind that in this context, it's important to understand that in New York, what matters is the funding in the primaries, not necessarily the funding in the actual election. Because it's a safe democratic city, the real contest as to who will be the next mayor occurs in the stage where the Democratic Party is selecting its next candidate, because whoever they select will very likely win, because New York's a liberal state. So it's incredibly relevant that the Open Society Foundation and the George Soros money went to Mamdani during that primary stage to knock out Andrew Cuomo, because that's where the money mattered. And the New York Post makes it clear that Soros funneled $37 million into the Democratic primary to secure the victory of Mamdani. So we've established that he is a Obama asset. We've now established that the Soros money went into this. Remember that photograph that we're showing you of Soros with Mamdani, which should be on your screens now. That photograph is a photograph of the son Soros, heir to George Soros, and Mamdani celebrating his victory. Remember something, this man, Soros, the son, is married to Hillary Clinton's former chief of staff, Huma Abedin. It is a small world, as they say. And so establishing those connections in terms of the financing look like this. Here is a graphic for you all, which breaks down some of how that funding was spent. All of these receipts will be in the Radical Dispatch for you in the written version of the stream tomorrow, don't worry. But you can see in this graphic, Mamdani Soros cash pipeline, and you can see how Working Families Organization, the Working Families Party, received $23.7 million. Make the Road Action, $3.51 million. M-Gage Action, $3.47 million. Community Voices Heard Power, $22.63 million. And so on and so forth there. These are the organizations that received funding from Soros to back Mamdani in his primary race against Cuomo, and they succeeded. Once Mamdani won in that primary race against Cuomo and became the official Democratic Party candidate for New York, him beating the Republican nomination, Curtis Sewell, was simply a matter of formality. So it mattered that the money went in at that primary stage as it did. To continue reading from the New York Post here on your screens, although Soros and his family didn't directly donate to Mamdani's campaign, Patrick Gaspard, you've heard that name, remember, you just heard that name before. Patrick Gaspard, a former Open Society Foundation's president, who is now a distinguished senior fellow for a liberal think tank heavily funded by Soros called the Center for American Progress, did play a key role. Gaspard, a longtime pal of far-left ex-mayor Bill de Blasio, who served as a top aide to former President Barack Obama, quietly helped guide Mamdani through the campaign, the New York Times reported. So again, that connection with the former Open Society Foundation's president, and that is George Soros charity, Open Society Foundations. Its president, Gaspard, who ran George Soros's donations, ended up joining Zohran Mamdani's campaign. He was also a former Obama staffer. And so we think there's little doubt when we look at the title of this stream that Zohran Mamdani is an Obama, Clinton, Soros, CIA asset. There is little doubt, and there should be little doubt after you see all these receipts, that that is the case. And again, that doesn't necessarily imply that he'll be a bad mayor. It just tells you who he is and where he's coming from, and then you can make up your own mind as to whether you think that works or not. Here is Fox News reporting on the Soros funding connections.
Post. George Soros has funneled $37 million to the Working Families Party and other lefty groups who then backed Zohran Mamdani. That's interesting in that Mamdani is the New York socialist who says billionaires shouldn't exist, and now look at him taking money from George Soros. He has a long history, by the way, of suggesting the future for New York and America is Democrat socialism.
We have twin crises in this moment, a crisis of authoritarianism from Washington, D.C., and a crisis of affordability here within our own city. I have said that I'm a democratic socialist, and I've defined that in many ways by the words of Dr. King decades ago, who said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country.
Socialism and far-left politics have become sort of a designer handbag for those who grow up privileged. And we know this because Mamdani lays out his own life security net.
I worked until January, and then I took time away from my job. And one of the major reasons I could do so was because I knew that if I ran out of my savings, my family would be able to support me. And that is not a luxury that many people have. And we should not have that kind of a reality play a role in determining who is able to commit more time to their campaigns.
So again, put aside whether or not you think wealth needs to be redistributed, whether or not the current distribution of wealth is fair or equitable. Clearly, there's a lot of work to be done there. And very few would deny that the economy is in a state of tatters, that New York City is not what it used to be, but rather has returned to what it used to be before that in terms of its relative decline. Many would say London parallels those wealth inequities. How you solve those is a question of political philosophy, and many will have different views on that. But the key point here is what is relevant to know is that you are running a campaign, as Mamdani is, ostensibly against billionaires, and yet here he is being supported in the millions by one of the world's most wealthiest political donors who seeks to influence elections around the world with his agenda, and that is George Soros and his son Alex Soros. And here is Alex Soros making it very clear that he is proud to have supported Mamdani. He posted it himself on his own Twitter page. That's on your screens right now. Alexander Soros, verified account. So proud to be a New Yorker. The American dream continues. Congrats, Mayor Zohran Mamdani. You see this photo with Hillary Clinton's former chief of staff, Huma Abedin's husband, Alex Soros, son of George Soros, is not an old photo. It's a photo of Soros and Mamdani celebrating his mayoral victory. It's current, and it indicates very clearly a Soros connection. Clearly, the son's in the photo. A Clinton connection, because he's married to Hillary Clinton's former chief of staff, Huma Abedin. And we've established already the Obama connection. And you get the picture. Zohran Mamdani is a product of the neocon warhawk globalist wing of the Democratic Party. And that's interesting. You don't need to agree with us or disagree with us around how to solve wealth inequity, or about whether the left-wing view or the right-wing view or the libertarian view on how to address wealth inequity is correct. Because at this stage, we're appealing to those who support this candidate emotionally and zealously cheer on his victory. Zohran Mamdani campaigned against colonialism, against the war in the Middle East, and against billionaires. And yet his backers, the Obama, Clinton, Soros network, are the neocon warhawks of the Democratic Party, who, when their President Biden was in power, did nothing to stop the war in the Middle East. And yet he campaigned against war on the Middle East. He campaigned against billionaires, yet has George Soros and Alex Soros's billionaire backing for his campaign. And so clearly the billionaires he's against are those that don't support him. The wars he's against are those that his political patrons don't launch. Obama, his political patron, dropped more bombs through drone strikes on the Middle East than even President Bush Jr. did before him. And we all know about Hillary Clinton's warmongering. So you have an ostensibly anti-colonial, anti-war Democratic candidate backed by the globalist neocon warhawk leadership of the DNC. The very same people who obstructed peace in the Middle East under President Joe Biden. The very same people who sat on their hands and did nothing as they campaigned against President Trump, who was campaigning against war. These people had a president in the White House in the name of Biden, and they did nothing to stop the ethnic cleansing in Gaza. And all those Islamist Americans who backed Biden, while from the other side of their mouths being opposed to war in the Middle East, were backing the machinery of war, as is now evident in hindsight that when Trump came in, he did exactly what he said he was going to do, and force all those parties in the Middle East, in instances against their own wishes, to agree to a Gaza ceasefire. And yet here we're expected to believe that Mamdani is the candidate who's against war, when his backers and the people he's politically and financially indebted to are the very neocon warhawks, the globalists in the DNC. It is actually quite comedic, because if you were to ask anybody to name the top 3 campaign issues that Mamdani campaigned for, they would tell you he's against billionaires and for wealth distribution, he's against war, and right there, those 2, he's backed by a billionaire, and he's backed by the warhawk neocon globalists in the DNC, such as Clinton and Obama and the CIA network. And so the cognitive dissonance around this candidate is why we've done this stream. It is important for people to realize he may or may not become a good mayor for New York, but let's not pretend that he's an organic anti-war candidate that emerged off the back of a popular uprising against the establishment in New York. Quite the contrary. He is an astroturfed candidate that was imposed upon the popular sentiment in New York so as to contain that sentiment and then to weaponize it against Trump, who actually stopped the war in New York. That's what's going on. And you only need to know who's backing him, Obama, Clinton, Soros, and the CIA network, to know that that is what's going to happen. It's not a good sign if the despised neocon warhawks in the DNC, the very globalists who caused much of the problems that we see today, are wholeheartedly backing your anti-war candidate. That's another word for containment. And that's clearly what Zohran Mamdani's campaign is, and how he'll be used against Trump, who actually stopped the war in the Middle East and a few other wars we'll come to in a moment. But at this stage, it's important to recognize that the topics that Mamdani is known for campaigning on do not match. His political rhetoric does not match his political operations. And when there's a gap between somebody's political rhetoric and their political operations meaning their funding and their backers, it's usually the operations that win and the rhetoric that gets compromised. To continue, we're going to go further into the campaign financing, just to leave no doubt as to who and how Mamdani's campaign was funded. On your screens now, again, back to Union Busting Bot poster. Zohran's campaign, if we blow this up for you, you should be able to see it more clearly. So that's fully on your screens about now. And if we read, Zohran's campaign finance records show they've spent approximately 5.5 million, with over half of it going to Deborah Schomer Media Group, run by former David Axelrod employee Deborah Schomer. Who's Deborah Schomer? So Zohran's campaign finance records themselves show that over half of the 5.5 million he spent went to Deborah Schomer Media Group. Well, Schomer worked on the presidential campaigns of Obama and Buttigieg. That's there for you on the screen. And again, an Obama connection. Here are the receipts for that. We'll publish all of this tomorrow, don't worry, in the Radical Dispatch. But all of that shows the money spent to Deborah Schomer Media Group by Zohran Mamdani's campaign. You can see there it's quite a lot. And here is Schomer's bio from her own website, Deborah Schomer Media Group. She's the owner director. And we'll read it for you. It says, Deborah Schomer, originally from Chicago and now a California resident, has more than 30 years of experience in media planning and buying, including a vast experience in political media. As the director of media planning and buying for David Axelrod since the inception of Axelrod and Associates, which later formed AKPD Message and Media, Deborah built the department, led, managed, and worked on media strategies for Democratic candidates, local, state, and presidential, including Obama and Buttigieg. So that is clear. Again, a key Obama PR operative, Deborah Schomer. Roughly half of Zohran Mamdani's campaign funding went to the Deborah Schomer Media Group. She worked on the Obama campaign and the Pete Buttigieg campaign. This is clearly an Obama, Clinton, Soros, CIA operation. So what is going on? Well, this moves us to our analysis. And this analysis we posted in June before Zohran Mamdani's victory, but we think it's relevant to read now because it's pretty much come true. And it's on your screens now. I'll read it for you. But this is what we think is going on. This is our Radical Media, our analysis. Posted on our Twitter feed at Majid Nawaz. We'll just read this for you now. The DNC just elected, and that's in their internal elections, the primaries. The DNC just elected a self-described Muslim socialist, woke as fuck young dude, Zohran Mamdani, as their mayoral candidate, which means he could very likely be the next NYC mayor. Well, clearly, he is the next NYC mayor now, but this was written in June. To carry on reading from that, and you'll see how prescient it becomes. He looks like, remember, we said this in June, right? He looks like he graduated from the Obama School of Political Smarm, combined with the BLM School of Political Ops. His father appears to have been a good man. We say that because he was a professor. You know, kind of respect professors. They're kind of, academics. They're smart. They're intelligent. Though we've established since writing that his father was brought in on the same Africa Airlift CIA program that President Obama's father was brought in on. So ostensibly, he appears to be a good man because he was an academic who did some good work in universities. Nevertheless, we'll continue reading. Zohran is a Ugandan Indian American. He is effectively a Shiite Muslim Corbyn who will be unleashed on New York City, replete with all his defund the police woke activism being torpedoed to office off the back of legitimate sympathy for Gaza and a misguided anti-Trump sentiment that is peculiar to New York City. Yes, his Shiism and being of East African Indian descent is highly relevant, whether he knows this or not. In the context of this op, after what just happened in the 10-day war with Iran and Israel, he is being accused with some evidence by the dark twin of this op, the Warhawk Likudnik Zionists, of having sung the praises of Hamas in his previous career as a woke-type nerd Backstreet Boys brown pop rapper who was not that good. The ingredients are all there for it all to kick off like a powder keg. NYC's pro-Hamas DNC wokists versus NYC's pro-Netanyahu big finance neocons. Woke versus Warhawk. This causes real-world chaos, televised anti-Semitism, and anti-Muslim hate popularized, combined, and amplified by globalist tech bros. The aim? The house always wins. Sectarian, anti-Muslim, and anti-Jew hatred televised globally as a way for big finance globalists in New York City to wreck Trump's Middle East peace between Muslims and Jews so that they don't lose their military-industrial globalist war machine. Protect the peace. Don't worry, their plan is failing and it will fail. Now, we've said this last June before Mamdani's election. We feel it holds up quite strongly. And it's a warning here on your screens that we issued in June. Warning, New York City is being used for a major op. With our symbol from our organization, Quilliam there, the black Q on your screens. Quilliam, of course, used to have a green Q until we went dark. But there's the black Q. You can decide for yourselves why it went dark. But there we have the warning we issued last June. And it appears as if that's exactly what's happened. And here you go again. Fox News investigation. Reporting clearly, headline there, inside the Mamdani. We'll put that on the full screen for you now, so you can see it. Inside the Mamdani machine, Soros, cash, socialists, and radical imams engineered Zohran Mamdani's path to power. This is divisive identitarianism. Identitarianism, identity politics. It's going to divide New York. We'll read from the article. A Fox digital investigation reveals that Mamdani's rise was no accident. It was engineered. A database of 110 groups backing Mamdani exposes a tight inner circle of organizations that identifies Muslim or socialist working hand in glove with 76 Democratic Party affiliates, allied groups, and unions. Look at the bold. Particularly important in this political machine are two networks, Linda Sarsour's Empower organizations and another constellation of groups called Engage. Why have we mentioned this? Linda Sarsour. Why is that relevant? Well, on your screens now, we're going to show you a bio of who she is there. Champions of Change, Linda Sarsour. And in that bio, it states very clearly that she served under President Obama and was awarded Champions of Change by none other than Obama herself. And Linda Sarsour is a very well-known American pro-Islamist. To make it very clear, we've said pro-Islamist American Muslim campaigner. She was very involved in the Obama years. While Obama was running his presidential kill list, droning people out of the sky, including a 17-year-old American citizen who happened to be a bystander, and Obama's kill list, which had zero congressional oversight. While Obama was doing that, he had cheerleaders such as Linda Sarsour calling him the anti-colonial pro-Muslim candidate. These are the people now, having backed Obama, who are backing Zohran Mamdani. And again, you can see from Mehdi Hassan's own website, ZTO, where the usual suspects are cheering on Mamdani. Those are the usual pro-Islamist suspects who backed Biden and therefore backed the prolonging of the ethnic cleansing in Gaza, while having the audacity to claim that they are anti-war in the Middle East. This is from Mehdi Hassan's site. I never would have imagined the city of New York would welcome Zohran Mamdani on the same day that the universe would expel Dick Cheney. Wajahad Ali writes how Mamdani embraced his identity in his win for NYC mayor, ushering a new era of Muslim representation in politics. And it's very typical of these identitarians to celebrate death. Now, Dick Cheney, by all accounts, was not a nice guy and certainly not politically allied to our worldview. He was a neocon war hawk. But to celebrate anyone's death is a bit uncouth. And yet here we have on Mehdi Hassan's own site, these people continuing with their divisive identity-driven politics, celebrating the death of Cheney on the same day as they celebrate the victory of the Obama, Clinton, Soros, CIA asset, Zohran Mamdani. And here is Mehdi Hassan. Again, it should be no surprise, therefore, to you all that the usual suspects backed this candidate. Before we carry on, it's important to remember who Mehdi Hassan is. Mehdi Hassan is a British Shiite Muslim who backed Biden during the ethnic cleansing in Gaza, despises Trump, despite the fact that it was Trump who stopped the war in Gaza, Biden, on his watch, allowed it to carry on. Mehdi Hassan, who ostensibly speaks as if he is anti-war, backed the warmonger neocon warhawk DNC against Trump. That same Mehdi Hassan who had to leave Britain in humiliation because he used to be political editor for the New Statesman, a relatively decent left-wing political magazine here, long-form left-wing political magazine. But only a year prior to that had applied for a job at the right-wing tabloid, the Daily Mail. And Dacre, the editor of the Daily Mail, appeared on a BBC Question Time panel with Mehdi Hassan, in which Mehdi Hassan proceeded to humiliate Dacre and disparage the Daily Mail as a rag. The Daily Mail took its revenge the next day by publishing on its front page Mehdi Hassan's application letter saying he agreed with all the values of the right-wing newspaper. By that time, he was the political editor of the left-wing New Statesman. Mehdi Hassan soon after had to leave the New Statesman and then eventually left the country entirely, went over to the US, joined NBC, began campaigning for Biden against Trump, eventually left NBC and set up his own platform, ZTO. And you can see the pattern. These are people who tell you they're anti-war while backing the war hawks in their respective political tribe. And here is Mehdi Hassan celebrating the Mamdani victory.
How do you feel tonight? I don't know how anyone feels today. Like this campaign proves what politics actually is. You know. Mahmoud Khalil is here. Mahmoud Khalil is here. He voted 5 times. He voted illegally 5 times. I need to go away from these guys. How do you feel tonight? How do you feel? I don't know how anyone feels today. Like this campaign proves what politics actually is. You know.
So there we have it. The usual suspects, Mehdi Hassan, Wajahat Ali, Linda Sarsour, the identitarian, pro-Islamist, and in Mehdi and Zohran Mamdani's case, Shiite campaigners who backed Biden for the continuation of the ethnic cleansing in Gaza over Trump, who stopped the war, and who are supported by the globalist neocon war hawk element of the DNC, are all celebrating the supposedly anti-war candidate, Zohran Mamdani. It is all rather strange and curious. As we said, it remains to be seen whether Mamdani's mayoralty is successful or not, as judged by whether or not he's good for New York. But it does appear as if this containment strategy was the plan all along. And perhaps it's prescient that we have here a clip of Mamdani saying that this was the plan all along. And we'll end on this. We'll actually expand it for you so that it's a full screen before we go to show you the clip. But it does appear as if the entire campaign was astroturfed for this very result by the Obama, Clinton, Soros CIA network.
To rebuild a coalition that had frayed over years of disappointment and neglect, to win people back to a Democratic Party that puts working people first. To rebuild a coalition that had frayed over years of disappointment and neglect, to win people back to a Democratic Party that puts working people first.
Now, the longer version of that clip, we'll publish that tomorrow. That clip actually has Zohran Mamdani saying that this was the plan all along. And clearly, it was the plan all along. Clearly, Zohran Mamdani and his campaign were not organic and generic. They did not emerge from nowhere off the backs of the hardworking people in New York City who understandably want change and who understandably chose Mamdani over Cuomo, given the choice that they had. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the anti-war candidate Zohran Mamdani is backed by the biggest war hawk globalist neocons in the US who run the DNC. That's Obama and Clinton and Soros and their perma-war network in the CIA. It's also very clear that that Mamdani, mixing the two up now, it's also very clear that Mamdani, who campaigned against billionaires, has the backing of billionaires in the form of Soros. So whether or not after knowing this information, you choose to support him as say a left-wing progressive in New York, it's up to you to reconcile how you reconcile the fact that you're anti-war, knowing that your anti-war candidate is backed by those responsible for some of the worst wars in the Middle East over the last couple of decades. Hillary Clinton, whose chief of staff, Huma Abedin, is married to Soros, Alex Soros, who there you saw is backing Mamdani. Obama, who there you saw is backing Mamdani. Those are DNC warhawk globalists. It's beyond a shadow of a doubt that Mamdani owes his rise to the DNC establishment. And it's beyond a shadow of a doubt that they funded him and that they ran his campaign and that they astroturfed it. So what you have really in the form of Mamdani is a smiling, smarmy politician who is controlled from behind the scenes by the usual suspects. How they control him, whether or not he does a good job in New York, the jury's out on that. But it is important at this stage to know exactly who the man is himself and who's backing him. And we hope that this stream has sufficiently demonstrated that. That's all we have time for this week on the Warrior Creed live stream. We ask all of our regulars to go to Radical Media on majidnawaz.substack.com. Sign up there. You'll get the written version of this stream, the Radical Dispatch, accompanied by the podcast of this stream. And we ask you to become premium subscribers to Radical Media, because behind the paywall, you get the extra content, including the podcast version of this stream. And without your support, we cannot continue doing this investigative work. Until next time, you've been listening to The Radical, Majid Nawaz.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.